Tonight, we step softly into the world of the medieval nurse, the quiet caregiver at the edge of plague, war, and heartbreak. You tend the dying, wipe the fevered brow, and carry the weight of too many lives slipping through your hands. There are no proper medicines, no real protections, and little thanks. Only long days, long nights, and the ache of knowing you can't save them all. You awaken to the sound of bells. Not soft, not musical, but hollow, echoing through the stone bones of the building like a warning. It is still dark, though the faintest seam of pale grey leaks through the cracks in the shuttered window. The air is cold, heavy with the must of damp stone, and your breath curls in the air like ghost smoke. Beneath your straw-stuffed mattress, the wood creaks, swollen from years of moisture. You blink, and already the ache in your lower back reminds you that you never really slept. Not truly. A few hours, if that. You sit up, the wool blanket rough against your fingers, and for a moment you just listen to the silence between the sounds. The faint rustle of habit cloth, the distant cough of someone not getting better, the drip of water from the leaking ceiling. You tie your apron with numb fingers, and by the time your feet touch the frozen floor, you already know today will be like yesterday. And tomorrow. And all the days before that. A parade of suffering with no fanfare, just your shadow quietly moving through it. Your morning begins in the laundry room, if you can call it that. A slanted space behind the chapel, where buckets of icy water sit waiting to devour your hands. You kneel, already damp at the knees, and begin scrubbing cloth, soaked in the blood, bile, and mucus of other people's pain. The lye soap burns your fingers. The wind bites at the back of your neck. The cento, the censer, iron-rich, clinging. No matter how hard you wash, some stains never leave. Some smells settle into your skin, like stories you can't unhear. You hum hymns under your breath to pass the time, to keep your mind from drifting too far into memory. There is no choice here, no rotation of duties. You are nurse, laundress, servant, and silent mourner all in one. The others walk past you without speaking. You are not invisible, just expected. A piece of the background, like the old wooden pail or the moss creeping up the wall. You are simply part of the cost of being alive in this place. When the sun finally cracks through the clouds, it offers no warmth. Just light, sharp and unsympathetic. You enter the sick room, where the walls seem to sweat illness. The patients lie on rough straw beds, arranged in haphazard rows, groaning or staring blankly at the low ceiling. Some twitch in fever, others mutter prayers to saints whose names you've long since stopped reciting. You carry a small basin of water and begin your rounds, washing foreheads, checking bandages, changing soiled linens. Your face remains neutral, a mask honed by years of loss and repetition. You cannot afford to feel not deeply. If you did, you'd shatter. The boy with the broken leg still cries when you approach. You smile softly, adjust his splint, and try to reassure him. But you both know the truth. It won't heal right. He'll limp, if he lives. And you will carry his face in the back of your mind, adding him to the quiet crowd of those you've watched slowly disappear. By mid-morning, your stomach growls in protest. You ignore it. Hunger is as much a part of your routine as prayer. If you're lucky, a crust of bread and weak broth await in the refectory, but only after the patients are seen. You pause to clean a festering wound. The man moans, delirious, calling out for a mother who died decades ago. The pus is thick, the bandage damp and sticky. You hold your breath as you press clean linen to the site. The stench curls into your nostrils, and yet your hands do not falter. This too is routine. Behind you, someone retches. A young nun, newer than most, unable to hide her disgust. You say nothing, only nod. She will learn, or leave, or break. Everyone does, eventually. You do not speak of the first time you cried behind the chapel, knuckles white around a splintering broom handle, eyes burning with helpless fury. That was years ago. Now you are quiet, capable, and a little colder than you once were. By noon, your knees throb from kneeling, your shoulders ache from lifting the weight of broken bodies. A monk asks for help with a patient seized by spasms. You hurry across the hall, skirts brushing the dusty floor. The woman on the cot convulses violently, her eyes rolled back, foam at the corners of her mouth. You hold her head, whispering whatever words come half prayer, half lullaby. A moment passes. Then another. Slowly, the fit ends, leaving her limp and sweating. You tuck the blanket around her, aware that the next one may be her last. She clutches your wrist as you rise, eyes wide, searching. You squeeze her hand gently, and for that instant, you are more than a nurse. You are anchor, witness, mercy. It is a moment you will remember and forget. Like all the others, like hundreds before it, each etched into you faintly, like scratches on soft wax, too many to count, too deep to erase. The afternoon stretches long and colourless. You mend bandages. You grind dried yarrow into a bitter paste. You empty chamber pots that steam with foulness. You stitch a boy's hand where a blade slipped. You sweep the hallways where blood and bile have left stains, like dark fingerprints. You speak little, your voice saved for instructions, or the occasional quiet song to calm someone's panic. In rare seconds between tasks, you stare out the tiny window where the world seems cleaner, somehow sunlight spilling onto the chapel garden, birds skipping through the hedges, the sky a watercolour of blue and fading grey. It looks peaceful, but you know better. Outside may be freer, but it is not kinder. In here, suffering is at least honest. Pain does not pretend. You feel it in the bones of others. You carry it home with you in silence. As dusk bleeds across the horizon, the bell tolls again. Evening prayers. A patient dies just before Vespers. A child, pale, small, with eyes too tired for one so young. You were holding her hand when her breath stilled. You close her eyes. You smooth her hair. You do not cry not here. You've learned to weep only when the hallway is empty and the night hides your face. You help carry her to the preparation table, where her body will be wrapped and buried by morning. The other patients watch silently, some with vacant eyes, others with quiet terror. Death walks beside you every day. You no longer flinch at its shadow. But you remember this one. This small girl who asked for her mother in whispers, who died with your hand in hers. Later, you kneel on cold stone in the chapel. The candles flicker. Your stomach clenches in hollow protest. You murmur prayers not for yourself, but for the dying, the dead, and the ones still fighting. You are not sure if anyone listens. But the words come anyway, like breath, like habit, like hope you no longer question. Afterward, you return to your corner, remove your apron, and wash your hands until the water runs clear. Beneath your nails, a stain of blood lingers. You tuck your fingers beneath the coarse blanket. You lie down. You close your eyes. And for one moment, in the darkness, you allow yourself to remember her name. You do not sleep easily. The noises continue: groans, coughs, whispered prayers, footsteps on stone. You have learned to drift in and out of rest like a tide. There is no true end to your day, only the quiet reset between dusk and dawn. You wonder, as you do every night, how many more faces you will see fade, how many more hands you will hold through trembling, how long your own body can keep moving through this world of suffering. But you do not dwell. You do not resist. You do what must be done. Because if you don't, who will? You are not a nurse in the modern sense. There are no sterile gloves, no antiseptic wipes, no soothing beeps from distant machines. Here, the scent of healing is vinegar and rot. You tend the sick not with high science, but with raw hands and faith. When blood pulses from a wound, you do not flinch. You reach for boiled linen strips and pray to Saint Sebastian. When pus oozes from sores that bloom like blisters of sin, you hold your breath and press herbs into the mess, hoping for mercy more than recovery. Each task is both devotion and desperation. They tell you God watches all, but you suspect he closes his eyes for some of this. You are his instrument, they say. But you feel more like his ragust, wrung out, and still expected to soak in more. You do not choose who lives or dies, but sometimes it feels like you do. A man with a shattered leg ace bled too much. You pack the wound with moss, bind it with cloth torn from your own robes, and whisper the prayer for protection. You've said it so many times you barely hear the words anymore. They roll from your tongue like breath, automatic and empty. But part of you still hopes. When the blood stops flowing, you exhale. Not in relief, never relief, but in permission to move on. To the next body, the next infection, the next soul on the edge. And when the man dies a few hours later, you tell yourself you did what you could. You always do. Because to believe otherwise would break you in half. There's an irony in your position. You are considered holy, even revered by some, and yet your work is repulsive. The priests offer blessings from a distance. You press your hands into weeping sores. The noblewomen donate alms from their balconies. You carry vomit buckets through narrow halls. You do not preach salvation. You scrub it, tend it, and sometimes bleed for it. The church praises humility, and in that you are abundant. Your humility stains your apron, crusts beneath your fingernails, and kneels beside feverish men who no longer know their own names. You are both sacred and soiled. You've heard whispers, even from the sister show. Some think the truly godly would never be so comfortable around the dying. But they've never cradled a plague child who begged for water with blistered lips. They've never watched a man die alone because no one else dared stay near. Piety, to you, is not a sermon. It is staying. Always staying. When you prepare your remedies, you do so with what little you're given. The apothecary's shelves are sparse bundles of dried rosemary, pots of honey, slivers of garlic. You crush roots into paste with a stone mortar worn smooth from decades of desperate grinding. Sometimes you brew willow bark in weak wine. Sometimes you smear mustard over the chest of a coughing patient, praying the heat will break the fever. You've memorized the combinations that work. Not because you studied them, but because you've watched them fail. You know what rotting flesh smells like when it turns to death. You know which eyes lose light first. You've stopped trusting theory. You trust experience and instinct. Even then, it's a gamble. You're playing dice with death, and he's always grinning. The bodily fluids never end. Blood, yes, but also sputum, bile, urine, feces, and the strange fluids that seep from places no one mentions. You clean it all. You do not wrinkle your nose. You learnt long ago that disgust is a luxury. You fold your emotions like laundry, tuck them away, and move your hands in silence. When a man soils himself in shame, you offer him water and change his linens without comment. Dignity is the one gift you can give him when healing fails. When a woman weeps from the sores on her thighs, you dab them gently, not asking how she got them, only how long they've burned. You are not judge, not jury. You are simply the one who remains when others turn away. The worst are the smells. The heavy, clinging scent of pus that burrows into your clothes. The sweet rot of gangrene. The iron tang of fresh blood, thick and warm. You stop noticing after a while until you leave the room and the clean air slaps you with the contrast. That's when you realize how foul it was, how much of it is still on you. Some nights you scrub your hands raw, but the smell lingers. In your nails, in your hair, even in your dreams. You've dreamed of festering wounds, of bodies that whisper your name through cracked lips. You've woken gagging at the memory of rot. And yet each morning you return. Because if not you, then who? The lines between healing and harming blur in your world. You bleed people to balance their humours even when they grow pale. You use heated iron to cauterize wounds even when the screams echo for hours. You apply leeches to the temples of feverish children, knowing full well that it may do nothing, but it may do something. You never know. You follow the rules of medicine, as laid out by men who've never held a dying child. You mix prayers with poultices. You do what you've been told. What you've seen, what you hope might work. Failure is constant, but every now and then miracle. A man walks again. A fever breaks. A wound closes without blackening. And for a moment, you believe. Not in God, not in science, but in your own quiet persistence. Some of the clergy say suffering is divine, that it purifies the soul, that the sick are closer to heaven. You're not so sure. You've seen too many screams, too many children who died too soon, too many mothers who laboured only to bury. If pain is a gift, it is a cruel one. You do not romanticize agony. You clean it. You contain it. You carry it on your shoulders so that others can forget. The world will move on, without remembering the woman who bled out in your arms, or the boy whose throat swelled shut as you sat helpless beside him. But you will remember, because no one else does, because memory is part of your work too. When a nobleman is ill, you are summoned with urgency. His chamber is cleaner, warmer. There are curtains on the bed. You are offered better herbs, more light. But he moans like the rest. His blood clots the same way. His breath rattles with the same fear. You treat him with the same hands you used to wash a beggar's back sores earlier that morning. You do not say this aloud. You simply bow your head and do your work. Even when his wife wrinkles her nose at your apron, even when his guards watch you like you might poison him. When he recovers, credit goes to Godor, the physician who entered once and left quickly. No one thanks you. They rarely do. But then again, you did not come here for praise. Some accuse you of being too good at what you do. When a woman recovers too quickly, whispers begin. Is she in league with darkness? Is the nurse using charms? You've hidden herbs before, pretended you knew less than you did, disguised skill as guesswork. Because to be competent as a woman in a world ruled by superstition is dangerous. Your compassion could be mistaken for sorcery, your calm for cunning, and so you tread carefully. You underplay. You smile meekly. You let others take credit. You survive. Because survival in your profession is itself a kind of victory. When night falls again, and the candlelight casts golden halos on the sweating brows of the sick, you feel the day settling into your joints like damp. You stretch your fingers sore, blistered, swollen. You pull the blanket higher on a sleeping man, smooth the curls of a fevered child, and carry a basin of bloodied water out to be dumped. You walk slower now, but your hands are still steady, your heart still tender, your silence still sacred. You are a nurse, not by name, not by title, but by the way you stay when others flee, by the way you kneel when others recoil, by the way you pour yourself out like oil from a lamp, hoping, always, that your flame will last just one day more. You were born into a world where your worth was measured by obedience and your silence was a virtue. To be a woman meant to serve and to suffer quietly while doing so. If you nursed, it was not called work. It was called duty, charity, or worse, penance. No one paid you, though they expected your hands to always be ready. You were taught that healing others redeemed your own sinful body. Your tenderness was holy only when it bled for someone else. They said you were closer to God through your sacrifice. But in truth, you were just conveniently invisible, too sacred to question, too lowly to reward. Your value came in whispers, in the way patients clung to you more than the priests, in how their final words were often not prayers but your name. You never chose this life. Not really. Maybe you were an orphan brought to the convent, or a second daughter without a dowry, or simply a woman who saw too much and spoke too freely. Here, in the cloistered walls of obedience, you became a nurse not out of ambition, but out of lack. You had no voice in the council chambers, no seat at the table where remedies were written down by learned men who never cleaned a bedpan. They wrote the books. You lived the reality. And yet, if you questioned them, you were labelled impertinent. If you suggested another way, a better herb, a gentler approach, they reminded you of your place. Leave the thinking to the physicians. You just pray. And so you nodded. You bowed your head. But you remembered every mistake they made. Every patient lost to arrogance. When you tended to women, you saw pieces of yourself in them, the same tired eyes, the same haunted patience. You held their hands through miscarriages, through violent births, through quiet miscarriages hidden from their husbands. You saw wounds no man would ever admit existed. You comforted girls too young to understand what was happening to their bodies, too scared to name the pain. You did not flinch. You became a keeper of secrets, a vessel of silence. Women wept into your shoulder, while the church debated whether their agony was divine punishment or a test of virtue. You knew better. You knew how suffering warped the body and the spirit. You knew that pain did not make anyone purer. It just made them smaller. And still, you stayed beside them, not to deliver them from judgment, but to remind them they were not alone. Sometimes, the same men who called your work holy would turn around and call your care unnatural. They praised you when you stitched their sons' wounds, but stared with suspicion when you healed a woman too fast. "She must be using charms," they'd whisper. "How else would she know these things?" You learned to speak softly, to add extra prayers aloud, to pretend your instincts were divine whispers rather than earned skill. You watched other women burned or exiled for doing less than you did daily. And so, you learned to bend, to kneel longer at chapel, to wear your plainness like armor. You never let your knowledge shine too brightly, because a woman who knows too much is dangerous. And a dangerous woman, in your world, rarely lived long. You were not allowed to dream beyond the walls. Marriage was forbidden. Desire was sinful. You swallowed your longing and wore celibacy like a second skin, even when your heart ached in the silence. You saw other women grow old beside you, their hands shaped like yours curved from years of lifting, kneading, washing. Their backs bent not from age, but from bowing, always bowing. You wondered if their hearts still stirred when someone smiled at them too kindly. You wondered if yours did, but the rules were clear. Your body was not yours. It belonged to the church, to the sick, to the ever-hungry mouth of service. Any hunger you had for love, for freedom, for softness, was a temptation to be confessed. So you buried it deep. The burden of womanhood did not end in the sick room. It followed you into every corridor. You were expected to be endlessly patient, endlessly giving. You could not show anger when a patient screamed at you, or when a priest dismissed your report. You could not cry when your body gave out from exhaustion. "Offer it up," they'd say. "Your suffering will bring grace." But no one offered up food when you were faint. No one offered up rest when your hands shook. Grace, it seemed, was always what you were supposed to give, but never what you received. Still, you smiled. You worked. You endured. Because what else was there? In the rare moments you looked at yourself truly looked, you saw a woman unrecognized by the world she served. Not a saint. Not a martyr. Just a body that had held too many hands, washed too many wounds, and spoken too many names that no one else remembered. You were a collection of other people's pain. Their stories clung to you. The man who confessed to crimes on his deathbed. The woman who died, calling for a lover she never named. The child who asked if heaven smelled like lavender. You carried these ghosts not with bitterness, but with reverence. Because, even if the world forgot them, you did not. You remembered, and in doing so, you gave them a kind of immortality. Sometimes, late at night, you imagined what life would be like if you had been born a man. Would your hands have been cleaner? Would your voice have been heard? Would you still kneel by the sick, or would you sit behind a lectern, speaking of medicine without touching it? It was a dangerous thought, but you held it gently, like a secret ember in your chest. You never let it burn too brightly, just enough to remind yourself that there was more than one way to serve. And perhaps, in another life, you could have chosen freely, but not in this one. Even among the sisters, there was competition. Not for status, there was little of that to go around, but for recognition, for kindness, for a moment of softness. You saw how some guarded their patience like possessions, how others measured worth by how long they could go without rest. It wasn't cruelty, it was survival. In a world that gave women so little, even the act of being seen became a currency. You understood. You did it too. You worked harder, stayed longer, smiled wider. Anything to remain useful. Because usefulness in your life was safety. The moment you stopped being necessary, you were dismissed or worse, replaced. And still, despite all this, you found pride in your work. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that demanded applause. But the quiet pride of knowing that someone slept easier because of your hands. That someone breathed longer because you stayed. That someone died holding kindness instead of fear. You found meaning in the rhythm of care, in the ritual of healing. Even when it went unnoticed. Even when it hurt. You were not thanked, not honored, not remembered, but you were necessary. And sometimes that was enough. You would not be remembered in the scriptures. No stained glass bore your image. But somewhere, in the hushed prayers of the dying, your name lingered like a final blessing. You may have lived in the margins, but you filled them with light. And though your place in history was never carved in stone, it was written softly in the hearts of those who lived because you refused to leave. You were a woman, and they called your work a curse, but you carried it like grace. The sick room is your stage, though no one applauds you here. The performance is ongoing, endless, a looping symphony of sounds that most people fear and flee. But you remain a quiet conductor of the chaos. It begins with breathing shallow, wheezing, rattling. The air is thick with it. Dozens of chests rising and falling in uneven rhythm, punctuated by groans that linger in the rafters like unanswered prayers. Someone coughs, and the sound tears through the stillness like parchment ripping. A baby whimpers from behind a linen curtain. Someone else, far older, mutters to himself in broken Latin. You know every tone by heart. The wet gurgle that means the lungs are filling. The dry rasp that speaks of fever. The sharp cry that ends too suddenly. Each sound maps out a story, and you are fluent in their language. You move through it with the calm of someone who no longer flinches. The sick room sings to you, always. And though it is a mournful song, you've learned to hum along. Every bed holds a different note. The man who shouts in his sleep, reliving wars fought decades ago. The girl who hasn't spoken in days, but gasps suddenly when you touch her forehead. The woman in the corner who moans with each breath, even while unconscious. You do not startle anymore. These are not cries for help. They are the sound of the body, remembering it is fragile. You listen because you must. You listen because often these cries come in place of words. A body in agony cannot form a sentence. It trembles, it convulses, it whimpers. And so you learn to translate. You recognize which groans mean fear, which mean surrender. You know when to fetch water and when to hold a hand, when to sing and when to sit in silence. There are times when the sick room grows louder than a cathedral and times when it goes utterly still. That silence is the loudest sound of all. The scent is just as present as the sound. The air hangs heavy with sweat, urine, damp linens, and something darker death hovering close. You recognize it when it enters. It doesn't knock. It seeps. First into the corners, then under the beds, then into the patient's breath. And then, inevitably, into their stillness. The sick room prepares itself like an orchestra quieting before the final note. You've seen it 1,000 times. And each time, it breaks you slightly more. Not with surprise, but with recognition. You stand at the doorway, and you know. The boy who was strong this morning now stares blankly at the rafters. The mother who kept asking for her son no longer speaks. You light a candle. Not for their soul they will find their own way, but for the ones who must keep breathing in the room they just left behind. You speak softly here. Even when urgency strikes, you do not yell. Raised voices do not help wounds close. They do not soothe fevers. You lean in, speak close to the ear, where you know sound still lives, even as sight and touch fade. You say their name, over and over, like a lullaby, because sometimes that's all anyone wants to be reminded they are still real, still seen, still human. You've called names hundreds of times to people too far gone to reply. You've whispered prayers to ears that could no longer hear. You've sung songs your mother used to sing when you were feverish yourself. You do it not because it changes the outcome, but because in that moment it matters more than medicine. It is a thread back to the world, even if it frays before it can hold. The rhythm of care is its own kind of music. You wring out a cloth and the water slaps into the basin. You press it to a fevered brow and listen to the sigh that follows. You grind herbs against stone, the slow circular scrape like a metronome. You unwrap a bandage crackle of dried blood and wrap another, clean and damp. Each action becomes part of the song. You do it without thinking, and yet it feels sacred. Like ritual, like communion. You lose yourself in it sometimes. Forget the hour. Forget the ache in your knees. You become your hands, your breath, your rhythm. Until someone cries out again, and the spell breaks, and you return to the suffering, to the need. Not all sounds are tragic. Some surprise you. The soft laughter of a patient who, against all odds, feels a moment of relief. The quiet giggle of a child amused by the rustle of your skirts. A humming voice beside you, another sister joining in song as you clean the floor together. These are rare, but they glimmer like stars in the sick room's night sky. You do not chase them, but when they appear, you hold them gently. You keep them tucked behind your ribs, where the sadness cannot steal them. They remind you that even here, where decay rules, life still dares to show itself. Not grandly, but defiantly. A single note of joy in a symphony of sorrow. Sometimes, in the darkest hours, when the rest of the convent sleeps and only the gravest patients remain awake, you allow yourself to feel the weight of the music. The sick room feels like a chapel then. You walk softly. You whisper your movements. You pray silently over bodies that may not see sunrise. You light candles and place them near the most fragile. You sit by the woman who hasn't moved in hours and simply let your presence be the song. No words. No movement. Just breath. Just being. This is the purest kind of nursing, the one no one teaches, the one no one praises. But you know its worth. You've seen the way a dying hand relaxes when someone holds it. You've seen pain soften, not from medicine, but from presence, from witness. Each day, you add new verses to the sick room symphony. New cries, new silences, new names whispered into the folds of your apron. And when the day ends, and you leave to rest your head on the straw mat in your cell, the music follows. You hear it in your dreams, the coughs, the mutters, the shifting weight of suffering. You wake with it still in your ears. You rise, and it begins again. The same symphony, the same instruments, the same aching tempo. And you, the nurse, the unseen conductor, keeping time with your footsteps, your hands, your heart. You don't have much not by modern eyes. There are no metal trays of precision instruments, no vials of antibiotics, no sleek machines blinking with digital certainty. Instead, your tools are humble, crude, and often unreliable. You have knives, but not scalpels rust-flecked and dull-edged, meant for slicing bread as much as skin. You have leeches, kept in shallow bowls, wriggling in cool water like living prayers, that maybe, somehow, they'll pull the poison out. You have a bundle of herbs, tied with fraying twine lavender, sage, yarrow, comfrey dried too long or not enough. You have vinegar, lye, ash, and oil. You have cloth-through linen, too little of it. You have your hands. And some days, it feels like that's all you really have. Your hands, cracked, blistered, trembling but steady. Always steady. The mortar and pestle are your constant companions. You grind roots until your wrists ache, crush dried leaves into powders you aren't sure will help. You mix them into pastes that you spread onto boils, into teas you coax the feverish to drink. Sometimes they work. Sometimes they don't. You've learned not to trust too much in results. Healing is as much mystery as method here. What helps one person kills another. The same poultice that soothes one man's leg sends another into seizures. The line between remedy and curse is thin, and you've tiptoed across it more times than you care to admit. You've prayed over every mixture not because you believe it will guarantee success, but because it's all you can do. Sometimes hope is the only active ingredient. Your bandages are torn from old shifts, washed in boiling water and hung to dry over fire. They're stiff, scratchy, never clean enough. You wrap wounds with them anyway, praying they won't fester. There's a way to fold the cloth to keep pressure steady, a way to knot it so it doesn't slip. You learned it by doing, not by instruction. No one taught you formally. You learned by watching wounds closer rot. You keep the linen in a woven basket at your side, organized by nothing more than habit and instinct. The blood seeps through so quickly some days. You replace them over and over. You lose count. And when there is no linen left, you tear your own underdress because there is no other option. You bleed comfort from your own bones. There is honey when you're lucky, thick, golden, miraculous. You smear it over burns and deep cuts, whispering thanks, even as it sticks to your fingers and draws flies. You've seen it save tissue, keep rot at bay. It's rare so precious that sometimes you hide it beneath a loose floorboard, tucked away for when you know you'll truly need it. The physician calls it superstition. You call it survival. You don't care what the scrolls say you've seen, the way it works. Just like you've seen vinegar clean wounds better than wine. Just like you've seen urine used to test for pregnancy, or taste the sweetness of death in the mouths of diabetics long before the word existed. These aren't theories. They're lived truths. Written not in books, but in breath and loss. You use fire too when you must. Hot irons held in the brazier until they glow like fury. You press them to bleeding stumps or deep wounds to stop the flood. The flesh sizzles, blackens, screams. You hold them down when they thrash. You bite the inside of your cheek until it bleeds. You don't look away, because if you flinch, they might die. Cauterization is brutal. It's final. It saves and scars in equal measure. You hate the smell the way it lingers, foul and thick, like burnt meat mixed with sweat. You hate how calm you've become doing it. You hate that it works. But you do it anyway. Because in this world, mercy often comes dressed as horror. Then there are the tools that aren't tools at all. The ones you carry in your voice, your posture, your eyes. A firm whisper can calm a panic. A soft song can distract from pain. A hand resting gently on a shoulder can remind someone they are still alive, still human. These are your most effective instruments. And they're invisible. No one thanks you for them. No one documents them. But you know their value. You've watched a man survive a fever simply because he wasn't alone. You've seen children cling to you, breathing easier beneath your lullabies. You know that touch heals in ways tinctures cannot. You are nurse, Yes, but also mother, priest, midwife, mourner. Your empathy is an unmeasured salve. You keep a pouch of salt hidden in your apron. It wards off infection sometimes. It preserves. Sometimes it's thrown into wounds. The screams are unforgettable. But worse is when there's nothing at all. No salt, no honey, no vinegar, no herbs. Only your bare hands and a basin of cloudy water. And still, you try. Because not trying is worse. You wash the wound. You dry it with your breath. You wrap it with the last clean strip. You whisper to the patient, though their eyes don't move. You pray not for healing, not always. Sometimes just for peace. Sometimes just for a little more time. The leeches are kept in a clay pot. You feed them with your own blood when the patients refuse. You've grown used to their squirming, the slow swell of their bodies as they drink. They're meant to draw out illness, restore balance. You're not sure if they help, but the priests say they do, and the physicians swear by them. You once placed 3 on a dying man's neck. He passed within the hour, and still they told you it was the best you could have done. You wonder, sometimes, if the tools are meant more to make you feel useful than to actually save anyone. But it doesn't matter. Even if they are only symbols, you cling to them like a drowning woman to driftwood. You've broken needles on thick skin. You've splintered bones with bark and cloth. You've dug splinters from infected toes with fingernails. You've stitched wounds by moonlight using thread unravelled from a hem. Every object around you becomes a potential tool. Every scrap, every shard, every broken spoon. Necessity teaches you creativity. Scarcity teaches you sacrifice. You don't have the luxury to wait for the perfect tool. You work with what's there, what's now. Always. And still, people die. They die in your arms. On your table. In their sleep without warning. Sometimes, even after everything you've done, everything you've tried, they slip away quietly or violently. And you're left holding bloodied linen, wondering what else you could have used. What you missed. What you'll do differently next time. The failure isn't in your tools. It's in the world. In the way it offers so little for so much suffering. In the way it expects healing without ever giving you the means to truly provide it. But you don't stop. You can't. Because maybe next time, maybe. And so, you rise again. With your knife, your herbs, your salt. With your hands, your voice, your breath. With your unshakable, unexplainable resolve. You open the cupboard. You feel the weight of each object. And you whisper not a spell, not a command. Just a hope. A quiet promise. Let this help. Let this be enough. You remember the year it began, not by the calendar, but by the sound. The bells rang differently faster, harder, without pause. No longer the slow toll of a passing soul, but a frantic rhythm of death tumbling over itself. You remember the way the air changed, as if grief had weight and hung, suspended in the rafters. It began with rumours whispers of a sickness in the port towns, then caravans that arrived empty-handed, their traders coughing blood onto the cobblestones. And then it was here. You didn't need to be told. You saw it in the eyes of the sick, in the black sores that bloomed like curses across skin, in the sudden stillness that followed a single cough. It moved like wind unseen, but felt in every corner of the ward. Your tasks multiplied like rats. More bodies. More boils. More fear. The symptoms were unmistakable. Sudden fever, swelling in the armpits and groin, skin that darkened like bruised fruit. The afflicted died quickly sometimes, within hours. You tried your usual herbs, your boiled linens, your prayers spoken until your throat bled. Nothing worked. Nothing even slowed it down. The bodies came faster than you could clean them. Some patients arrived already dying. Others arrived healthy and perished overnight. The benches outside the sick room overflowed with moaning souls, waiting their turn to vanish. The priests stopped visiting. Even the bravest among them fled or locked themselves in prayer. But you stayed. Not because you were fearless, but because leaving felt worse. The fear inside the convent was thicker than the plague itself. Sisters who had worked beside you for years now flinched at your approach. They saw the stains on your apron, the ash beneath your fingernails, and whispered about curses, about divine wrath. Some said the plague was punishment for pride. Others said it was the devil in flesh. But no one had answers. Only fear. And fear turned sharp. You heard the mutters, the way they said your name with suspicion. She touches too many of the dying, one said. She never gets sick. They wanted you to stop, to step back, to let the dying die alone. But you couldn't. You had looked into their eyes. You had seen their terror. And you knew above everything that no one deserved to leave this world with no hand to hold. You wore the same apron for weeks because there were no clean ones left. You burned your linens by the cartload. You buried bodies until your hands blistered. You dug graves until your back spasmed. You watched children scream for mothers who had died hours earlier, and you held them even when it risked your life. You lost count of how many you tried to save. But you remember the first one who lived. A girl, no older than 10. Her fever broke. Her breath steadied. Her eyes opened, and they were still full of light. You wept beside her bed like a child. You didn't even realize it until your tears soaked through the straw mattress. That one survival fed you for weeks. It reminded you that the plague couldn't take everything. Still, it tried. Your own sisters began to fall. One by one. The strong ones. The kind ones. The ones who sang hymns even while changing bandages. You washed their bodies with shaking hands. You buried them in graves. You helped dig. You stopped singing. You stopped sleeping. You began to carry a small, token old ribbon from your mother tucked inside your dress. Not for protection, just for something that wasn't grief. You couldn't afford to catch the sickness, but you knew you would. It was only a matter of time. Every fevered breath you felt on your cheek, every black sore you cleaned, it was coming for you. But you didn't stop. If anything, you moved faster, more urgently, as though trying to outrun the shadow already at your heels. The city outside the convent turned into a ghost. Streets once full of voices and carts now echoed only with wind and the slow rattle of death carts. The gravediggers stopped ringing bells. There were too many dead. Entire families disappeared in days. The baker's wife, the man who sold wool, the boy who once brought you wildflowers and called you Sister Smile, gone. All of them. You sometimes thought of running, taking what you could and fleeing into the woods. But where would you go? What world would be left waiting for you? So you stayed. Not for duty. Not even for faith. But because the dying still whispered your name. One night you fell ill. A fever gripped you so suddenly you collapsed mid-step. The ground was hard. Cold. The world spun. You remember the faces that appeared above you blurred, trembling. You heard someone weeping. You thought it might be yourself. They laid you in the corner of the ward you had once walked with purpose. Now you were another patient. Another risk. Another dying breath waiting to be counted. You do not know how many days passed. You only remember the burning, the shivering, the dreams that felt like drowning. And then somehow you woke. Alive. Weak, but breathing. The plague had touched you. But it did not take you. Why? You'll never know. But your breath that morning felt heavier than ever. A gift, yes, but one you had to earn again every day forward. When you returned to the ward, there were fewer beds, fewer moans, fewer sisters, fewer eyes watching you with fear. The plague was retreating as suddenly as it had arrived. It left behind silence, ashes, and memories you'd never escape. You moved differently now, slower, more reverent. Every step felt like walking on graves. You were changed, not just in body, but in soul. The laughter you once carried now lived deeper inside, harder to reach. The songs you used to hum sounded too loud for a world so hollow. But still, you hummed. Because someone always needed a song. You do not speak of that year often. Not aloud. The world wants to forget. It builds new walls, paints new doors, fills the churches with cleaner voices. But you remember, in your hands, in your dreams, in the way you still flinch when someone coughs too suddenly. The plague is over, but it never truly leaves. It becomes part of you, woven into your ribs, like the stitching of your old apron. you survived. But survival was not freedom. It was simply another burden to carry. And carry it you did. With quiet, with strength, with the memory of the girl who lived and all the others who did not. You belong to Godor, so they say. The moment you took the veil, the world outside shrank into whispers and shadows. You made vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but no one told you hunger would come too. You eat once, maybe twice a day. A bowl of thin broth, a crust of bread, sometimes a few wilted greens, if the garden yields enough. It is not penance. It is simple lack. The convent is poor, stretched thin by too many sick and too few donors. Your holy orders mean you may never marry, may never own, may never command. But you can suffer. That, at least, is free. And suffering, they remind you, is sacred. You've heard that line so many times it echoes when you chew. You chew slowly now. Not to savor, but to trick your stomach into thinking you've eaten more than you have. You do your rounds light-headed, your knees trembling by the end of each corridor. You lift heavy bodies with arms that barely hold your own weight. You climb stairs while your breath wheezes in your chest. You laugh sometimes, not because anything is funny, but because the absurdity of working this hard, this long, with this little, feels surreal. You remember once fainting mid-bandage. You woke to the patient holding your hand instead. They thought you had prayed yourself into a trance. You didn't correct them. Better a miracle than the truth that your stomach had been empty for nearly 2 days. You smile at the memory now, bittersweet. Sometimes you think you've survived on smiles alone. Because food, clearly, has not been enough. You are not alone in your hunger. The sisters speak of it in passing, never directly. No one complains aloud. It feels improper, even dangerous, to voice need when so many have nothing. But their pale cheeks, the way they clutch their rosaries tighter at supper, the way their eyes linger too long on bread crumb-sole, betray the truth. You've seen one sister scrape her bowl with a spoon until it sang. You've seen another press a finger to the inside of a pot, then lick it like honey. Hunger humbles. Hunger silences. Hunger becomes prayer, not because it is holy, but because it must be endured. You close your eyes at meals and mouth the blessings. Not out of faith, but to keep from crying at the emptiness in your gut. Fasting is encouraged, praised, even rewarded. The priests speak of saints who lived on nothing but light. But you are not a saint. You are a woman with a collapsing body and a list of patients that grows longer each day. There is no reward for your starvation. Only fatigue. Only bone-deep cold that refuses to leave your limbs. When you bleed, your blood is slow and thin. When you sleep, your dreams are filled with tables, plates, figs, meat, warm bread torn in two. You wake ravenous, and then with shame, because even your dreams betray your vows. You are supposed to hunger for heaven, not apples. But heaven does not visit the sick room. Hunger does. There are feasts in the city, of course. Rich homes with roasted fowl and tables overflowing. You catch glimpses of them when you're sent on errands, carrying bandages or letters. You smell meat in the air, hear the clatter of goblets and spoons. Once, a boy offered you a plum from his basket. You took it, trembling. It was warm from the sun, sweet in a way that made you cry. You never told anyone. You washed your hands until the scent was gone. But part of you has never forgotten it. The taste, the kindness, the reminder that sometimes mercy comes not from heaven but from an ordinary child. The church offers little help. It teaches discipline, yes, but discipline does not fill bowls. You are expected to fast often, to give your portion to the sick, to offer up your pain as a form of grace. And you do. You give your bread to the boy too thin to swallow his medicine. You give your soup to the woman who hasn't eaten in days. You offer again and again until you forget what it means to eat for your own sake. Charity, they call it. You wonder, sometimes, what charity is left for you. When your hands shake too much to stitch a wound. When your mind fogs so badly you forget which herb to use. When you begin to see the Virgin in the flickering candlelight, not from piety, but from sheer aching depletion. Winter is the worst. Food spoils. Roots rot. Bread grows hard. You chew anyway. You swallow, even when it scratches your throat like dust. You thank God for the smallest thing's warm broth, a second turn at the pot, the accidental blessing of leftovers. You've learned to stretch hunger into patience, to stretch silence into prayer. You have also learned which herbs dull the ache in your stomach. You brew them quietly, adding them to your evening cup, not to heal, but to trick. Even survival, now, feels like deception. You keep moving because you must. The sick do not care if you've eaten. Fever does not pause for your weakness. The rhythm of care continues, always. You hide your fatigue behind gentle smiles. You cover your shaking hands with folded sleeves. And when you kneel at the altar each night, you offer not just your faith, but your emptiness, your aching bones, your cracked lips, your hollow middle. You offer your entire worn-out body, hoping that somewhere in the vast silence of heaven, someone will see. Someone will care. You never ask for food. Just strength. Just enough to get through the next hour, the next patient, the next day. There is a cruel sort of beauty in your hunger. It softens your gaze. It makes you gentler, slower, more deliberate. You move through the world like someone underwater, quiet, tender, weightless. Your voice lowers. Your fingers learn to be lighter. You become a whisper in the sick room. a presence so subtle that the dying mistake you for an angel. Maybe you are. Maybe you've become something between body and spirit, sustained by something no one else can see. Or maybe this is just what starvation does. You've forgotten what your body felt like when it was strong. Still, you do not stop. You bandage, you soothe, you wash the dying. You pray over empty bowls and rise from empty beds and return to a ward where need blooms like thorns. You live somehow. You serve always. And when the rare feast day arrives and someone places a full plate before you, you tremble. You eat slowly, reverently. You chew each bite like sacrament, because you know what it costs. You know how hollow the world becomes without it. You know that even saints perhaps, especially Saint Shunga, you are surrounded by women, yet loneliness clings to you like a second skin. The convent is filled with voices, gentle ones, wise ones, even kind ones, but there is a silence beneath them all that no hymn can mask. You rise together, kneel together, serve together, but you sleep apart, each in your narrow cell, each with her own small secrets tucked under a straw pillow. You are not allowed to speak of longing, but it hums in every corner. A glance too long, a touch too hesitant, a smile that lingers. You have heard love called dangerous, sinful, worldly. But in your quietest hours, you know that real love, might be the one thing that could keep you from breaking completely. Still, you bury the feeling. Again and again. As you've been taught, there is no place for romance here. Affection must be redirected, sanctified, scrubbed clean. You are expected to pour it into your patients, into prayer, into silence. But the body remembers what it longs for, in the way your hand craves to hold more than a fevered wrist, in the way your breath catches when someone speaks your name a little softer. You do not act. Of course not. But your mind wanders sometimes to the face of a patient who survived and looked at you like you were a miracle. Sometimes to another sister whose laugh warms you more than any fire. You confess it in whispers, not because it is wrong, but because you were told it is. And guilt grows in the same place where tenderness once bloomed. The nights are the hardest. After prayers, after silence has settled like snow across the stone, that's when the ache arrives. It's not physical, not entirely. It's the ache of being unseen in the way you crave. Not as healer, not as servant, not as saint, but as woman, as self. You dream of someone brushing hair from your eyes, of fingers laced in yours not in suffering, but in softness. You wake with your arms curled around your own body, as if your sleep self is trying to hold what your waking self never can. And then morning comes, and with it the guilt. You sweep the feelings into corners. You put them beneath the robe, and you serve. Because what else is there? You've seen what love can do outside these walls. You've nursed women broken from childbirth, from abandonment, from beatings delivered by men they once adored. You've heard whispered confessions of girls sent away in shame. You've watched romance twist into ruin. So part of you is relieved. At least here, no one owns you. No one claims you. But freedom is not the same as connection. You are safe, yes, but untouched. And touch is something your skin remembers, like a ghost. When you bathe the dying, when you cradle a child, you are reminded of how much care can be contained in a palm. You give it freely, but you rarely receive it back. Even friendship here is tempered by duty. You do not gossip. You do not confide too deeply. You fear being suspected of favoritism, or worse, affection. You've watched others grow close, only to be separated by seniority, reassignment, or suspicion. Love is not forbidden, but it is feared. It is a flame the church prefers to keep behind glass. And so, you love quietly. You offer extra bread to the sister who looks pale. You hold the hand of the one who cried in her cell the night before. You smile longer than needed. You hope they understand, that they feel seen, because you do not have the words or the freedom to say it aloud. Sometimes patients fall in love with you. It's not surprising. You are their warmth in a cold world. You wash their wounds. You whisper their names when no one else does. You see them when they feel invisible. You never encourage it, but you understand. Once a man kissed your hand before dying. You didn't flinch, but you felt it in your ribs for days. Not the kiss, the gratitude, the ache of being needed not for skill, not for duty, but just for being there. You never told anyone. You folded the memory like a letter you could never send and placed it deep within yourself. Even that felt like sin. Your heart still beats. That is the truth they forget. They see the robe, the calm, the composure. They do not see the woman who once danced in a spring meadow. The girl who once wrote poems about a face she can no longer remember. You buried her, yes, but she still sings, faintly, beneath the weight of linen and routine. She hums when the sun slants just right through the cloister windows. She stirs when someone smiles with softness. She grieves even when you don't. You try to hush her, but some nights she wins. And you cry. And you don't even know why. Loneliness here is not loud. It doesn't scream. It doesn't demand. It simply lingers. It walks beside you in silence. It sits across from you at meals. It follows you into the sick room whispering, "And who will hold you when you're the one bleeding?" You have no answer. You only keep working. You only keep serving. You've grown so used to pouring out, you've forgotten what it feels like to be filled. But the ache does not go away. It only grows quieter, heavier, more familiar, like a shadow that does not leave. and yet you love. You do. Not romantically, not completely, but fiercely. You love every hand you hold, every name you remember. You love your sisters even when you cannot tell them so. You love the world even as it forgets you. You love because that is the only rebellion left. And in that love-lonely quiet, aching there is something holy. Something real. Something that even the church cannot name, but which you carry anyway. Like a secret ember. Like a prayer never spoken. Like a heartbeat that refuses to stop. You tell yourself you're used to it, that you've seen enough death to no longer flinch. But when it's a child, everything changes. The world feels smaller, crueler, unbearably quiet. Children are not supposed to die. Their deaths carry a silence deeper than any adult's passing a stillness that settles into your bones and never leaves. You walk through the ward and see their small bodies tucked into blankets too coarse for their skin, their faces flushed or too pale, eyes blinking slowly like shutters caught in wind. They do not speak much. The sick ones never do. But they look at you with questions their mouths cannot form. And sometimes, with hope, that's the hardest part. The way they still believe you can save them. You kneel by their cots, your knees aching against cold stone, and dab their foreheads with wet cloths. You sing lullabies half remembered from your childhood, ones your own mother used when you had fevers. You speak softly, tell stories you invent on the spot. You create worlds where they do not hurt, where they run and climb and laugh. They smile, sometimes. Their fingers twitch in your palm. They look at you as if you are magic, as if your hands alone can lift the weight from their chest. But you know the signs. You see the slow unraveling of breath, the soft withdrawal. Their eyes no longer follow your voice. Their lips turn dry. You keep smiling anyway, because if they see you cry, they'll know the truth. You've seen infants convulsing in their mother's arms, toddlers too weak to lift their heads, children coughing blood, boys too young to have been cruel, girls too gentle to deserve such agony. You've watched their bodies tense and seize, their small ribs rising like tiny wings against the strain. You try everything: herbs, poultices, wine for the pain, but often it is not enough. You wrap them in your arms when the shivering starts. You hum into their ears until their trembling stops. When they go, they do so in silence. No wails. No screams. Just breath, and then not. You always sit with them longer than necessary, as if your presence might keep them tethered a moment more, as if not moving could reverse the ending. But it never does. Sometimes the parents are there. Sometimes they are too sick to come. Sometimes they are already gone. You've watched a mother collapse upon her child's body, screaming with a pain so raw it splits the air. You've seen fathers go rigid, as if even their grief has been denied. You've seen siblings who do not understand, who ask when their brother will wake, and look to you for answers you cannot give. You become the keeper of these moments. You do not explain death, you absorb it. You become the soft thing in the room, the one who holds and murmurs and does not run. Because someone has to stay. Someone has to stay when a child dies. You remember them all. Their names blur, but their faces remain. The boy who wanted to be a baker. The girl who asked if the stars would still shine when she closed her eyes. The baby who laughed once, just once, before the fever took him. They visit you in your sleep. Not as ghosts, but as memories. In your dreams, they are always well. Always running. Always turning back to wave at you. You wake with tears on your pillow and an ache in your chest that never quite dulls. You go back to the ward anyway. You take a new child's hand, and you start again. The worst is when they know. When they ask you, directly, if they are going to die. You never lie. But you do not tell the truth either. You say, I will stay with you, and you do. You say, you are very brave, and they are. You tell them, you are loved, even if no one has said it to them before. Because in that moment, they are. By you. With a love deeper than language, stitched together from everything you have left. You press your lips to their forehead and pretend it's a blessing. Maybe it is. Maybe that final warmth means something. Afterward, you wash their small bodies. Gently. Reverently. You wrap them in clean cloth, even if it's the last you have. You light a candle. You whisper their name over and over. You carry them with your arms, and then with your memory. The room feels colder without them, emptier. You find yourself glancing at their bed days later, expecting to see them there. You find yourself reaching for their favorite cup, their rag doll, their blanket. You took it away, slow and careful, like folding grief. You have no children of your own. That was never meant to be your path. But you have mothered more than most women ever will. For a few hours, a few days, you are everything to them: nurse, parent, lullaby, shelter. They cling to you with complete trust. And when they go, they leave with pieces of you in their hands. You do not get those pieces back. You just grow around the space they left behind. You learn to walk with it, to breathe with it, to heal others, while you remain quietly broken. Others don't understand. They say children are closer to God, that their deaths are pure, that they are spared the cruelty of growing older. But you have seen their fear. You have seen their agony. And you know better. There is nothing sacred in watching a child suffer. There is only cruelty and quiet and the unbearable weight of powerlessness. You carry it anyway, because someone has to. Because even if you cannot save them, you can hold them. You can make sure they do not leave this world afraid. All alone. You say their names during evening prayers. You light a candle not just for their souls, but for your own. Because a part of you dies with every child, and a part of you comes back to life when one survives. You do not know how many more you can lose. But when the next sick child is carried in, you do not hesitate. You reach for the cloth. You reach for the herbs. You reach for their hand. Because that is who you are. That is what you do. And if someday you die in this ward, your last breath will be soft, and your last thought will be small hands curled inside your own. You will not be remembered for sermons or speeches. But maybe, just maybe, you will be remembered in the hush of a child falling asleep painlessly, in the peace on a tiny face that left this world held in love. And if no one remembers then still, you will have been what they needed, if only for a moment. That is enough. That must be enough. The world of the broken is not a world of mercy. It is a world of blood, bone, and the sound of skin tearing. You've seen it all. The men who come in with shattered limbs, broken by battle, by fire, by fall. The women too, torn by accidents, burns, and the cruel weight of living in a body so fragile. These wounds are not the neat cuts you can stitch closed with a practiced hand. They are the kind that tear a soul as much as they tear the body. And you, the one who should be unfazed, unflinching, find yourself trembling as you approach. You start with the worst, the burns, the ones that make you gag with their stench. The skin blackened and cracked, the flesh peeling away like charred parchment. You can smell them before you even reach them, burnt, acrid, metallic. When you press your hands to their wounds, the heat radiates like an open flame. You wonder if their agony matches the fire that burned them. You wonder if you can make it stop. But you cannot. So you clean, and you dress, and you hold their hand as they scream and shudder beneath you. You breathe in the burning air, hoping that somehow it will make their pain bearable. But it never does. The worst are the faces. The faces that no longer resemble anything human. The burns are too deep, too consuming. Their eyes remain open, pleading for relief they will never know. You know that, even with the best care, their skin will never heal right. It will scar, it will stretch, it will burn with new pain, and it will remind them every moment of their loss. You try to shield them from that truth, offering what comfort you can. But when they ask, you know better than to lie. They are already broken, and there is no glue strong enough to hold them together. You've seen the men who come in with crushed bones, legs bent at angles that no longer make sense, arms splintered into fragments. The soldiers, the workers, the unlucky bystanders. Their pain is different. It is a deep, aching throb that rattles in their chest, not the sharp, sudden agony of fire or blade. You set the bones as best you can, resetting them with splints, pulling them straight, hoping they will heal. You push through the nausea as you touch their raw wounds, knowing that any mistake will cost them their mobility, their future, their freedom. You wonder if you are as broken as they are so much of your own self left behind, with each broken body you mend. Some of them beg for the release of death. You know the sound of that plea. It is not desperation. It is simply acceptance. The burn victims, the fractured ones, the ones too tired to fight any more, they all speak it, in whispers or screams. End it. Please, just let me go. You can feel their surrender in the air. You can feel their body release, almost as if it knows the end is coming. You do not give them what they ask. You cannot. But you hold them, you sit by them, you press wet cloths to their skin, and you hum. It is not a cure, not a promise. It is simply presence. The work takes its toll on you too. You feel the weight of their pain. You feel it when you lay them down at night, when you clean their wounds, when you hear them speak their last words. You do not get used to it. You do not harden to it. It moves into you, alongside the touch of the burnt skin and the pressure of their broken bones. You cannot walk away from them. They follow you every moan, every scream, every silent prayer left behind in the ward. You wonder if you will ever be whole again, if any part of you can remain untouched after so much suffering. In the quiet moments, after the last of the patients have been seen and the candles are snuffed out, you sit with your own body. You trace the lines on your hands, the scratches on your palms, the wear that accumulates from years of caring for others. You wonder if anyone ever sees your wounds. No one asks you how you feel. No one knows that your soul too is fragile. You are a nurse. You are the healer, the one who does not break. But inside, you are filled with pieces of the broken people you've touched. And you do not know how to heal that part of yourself. Then there are the accidents. The ones that come without warning. A cart falling from a height, a beam collapsing from the rafters, a sharp blade cutting too deep. The injuries are sudden, violent, and require all of your attention. You've seen men and women arrive at the ward with faces swollen beyond recognition, their limbs hanging loosely as if they were detached from their bodies. You have worked through these crises without hesitation, your hands flying to stop bleeding, to mend the wounds, to calm the terror in their eyes. You have learned to be quick, efficient, unemotional in those first moments because every second matters. But after, when the danger is over and they lay there, still breathing, you feel the weight of it. You don't get to mourn for them. Not here. Not while there are others waiting. But sometimes, when the night comes and you are alone, you remember them. You remember the way their skin felt under your hands, the way their voice cracked when they asked for water. You remember the look in their eyes when you stitched them back together, as though they were seeing you for the first time. You remember because they will never forget you. You are their thread back to the world they lost. You are the one who holds them when they shatter, even when you are the one who shatters too. There is little comfort in the work. It is not about making someone better. It is about helping them survive another day. And that is all you can promise them. You cannot stop the pain. You cannot undo what has been done. You cannot heal the brokenness in their hearts or their bones, but you can stand by them. You can bear witness to their suffering. You can hold their hand when they cry out in the night. You can hum them to sleep when the pain is too much to bear. You can be there for them, even when no one else is. It is a kind of grace. But it is a grace wrapped in the weight of the world. You carry it in the lines on your face, in the exhaustion that never leaves your shoulders, in the quiet way you walk through the ward, always present, always giving. The broken never leave you. Not really. Their faces stay with you in the dark. Their cries echo in your mind. Their hands remain in yours, even when you cannot touch them anymore. But you keep going, because that is what you do. You keep cleaning the wounds. You keep setting the bones. You keep pressing the bandages, one by one, around the broken bodies that need you. You keep offering your heart, even when it feels like there is nothing left to give, because this, too, is your calling. Not to save, but to stay. Not to heal, but to be the one who witnesses the broken, and to offer what little comfort you can. And when the next patient arrives broken, burnt, or shattered you, do not hesitate. You reach out, you offer your hands, and you stay. You have learned to be careful with your kindness, not because it is wrong, but because the world does not know what to do with it. A nurse who is too tender, too competent, too calm in the face of chaos becomes suspect. When your patients heal faster, when your herbs soothe too effectively, when you touch a burning forehead and the fever breaks the next day, you feel the eyes watching. Not with gratitude, with suspicion. There are whispers in the cloister. She is favoured, she is unnatural. She must be using charms. You hear them. You say nothing. But you begin to measure your gentleness, to portion it like rations. Too much, and you become a target. There was a time when your care was received as a blessing, when people sought you out not just for treatment, but for the comfort in your voice. You knew how to touch without hurting, how to listen without judgment, how to stay when others left. But that time passed. People changed. Or perhaps fear grew stronger. Now, you speak your prayers aloud. You display your herbs in plain sight. You explain every step of your process, even to those too weak to understand. Not because they need it, but because others are listening, judging, measuring whether your goodness looks too much like witchcraft. You've seen what happens to women who are too good at what they do. The herbalist burned in the village square. The midwife who vanished after a difficult birth. The older nurse who disappeared the night after she saved a dying boy. No one expected to live. Their kindness became their crime. Their knowledge, their undoing. You learned quickly. You never let your face show confidence. You downplay your skill. You act surprised when your treatments work. You shake your head modestly, even when you know exactly why the patient survived. You smile when the priest thanks God for the healing, and not you. It's safer that way. You begin to perform humility, to wear it like a second skin. You bow your head. You keep your eyes lowered. You make your touch lighter, even when a firmer one would help. You cry at the altar, even when you feel nothing but exhaustion. Because performance is protection. And kindness, deep, transformative kindness, must hide behind ritual and silence. You cannot afford to be known, only appreciated from a distance. Because the closer people come to your warmth, the more likely they are to fear it. It is a strange thing to live in a world where mercy is suspect. You never thought kindness could be dangerous, but you've seen the shift in a patient's gaze when you help them too quickly. The way villagers cross themselves when you pass by. The way mothers pull their children closer when you whisper a lullaby. They fear what they cannot understand. And they do not understand a woman who remains soft in a hard world, who does not demand payment, who does not flinch from wounds, who touches death and still smiles. To them, that is not holiness. That is unnatural, and unnatural things are punished. You take precautions now. You never go to the same market twice. You share your knowledge only in pieces. You let the priest lead, even when he misguides. You keep your remedies simple, your words gentler, your gaze quiet. You make your presence small, not because you are ashamed, but because the world is loud and dangerous and not made for women like you. You protect your gift by hiding it. You wrap it in silence. You learn how to stay good and kind and safe all at once. But some days you long to be known fully, to let your skill shine, to be recognized not as a mystery, but as what you area woman who works hard and loves harder. You wonder if they'd understand, if they knew the cost of your kindness. How many nights you've stayed awake, whispering prayers for patients who were already gone. How many times you've bled from your own hands to save someone else's life. How many names you carry inside you, etched into your heart like scars. Your kindness is not magic. It is pain. It is sacrifice. It is staying soft in a world that punishes softness. It is stitching wounds while your own remain open. If that makes you dangerous, then so be it. But you dare not say it aloud. You just keep doing the work. Quietly, relentlessly. And yet, some people do see you. The dying man who squeezed your hand and mouthed, "Thank you," without breath. The child who drew you a picture with shaking fingers. The old woman who said, "You remind me of my daughter," and then passed with your name on her lips. They do not fear you. They feel you. Your kindness reaches them not as a threat, but as a balm. They do not understand how you do what you do, but they do not question it. They simply receive it, and that is enough. That must be enough, because you cannot afford applause, only memory. In time, you learn to cherish anonymity. You become content with being the shadow at the bedside, the nameless comfort, the gentle ghost. You do not need to be praised. You need only to be allowed to stay, to offer your hand without suspicion, to speak your prayer without interrogation. You become an artist of invisible work, a healer whose legacy is not written in books, but in breaths that linger longer than expected, in pain eased before it took root, in death postponed by the gentleness of your presence. Still, you wonder. You wonder how many women like you were lost because they were too kind in the wrong place, too warm in a cold world. You wonder how many burned for giving too much of themselves, and how many survived only by pretending they had nothing to give. You wonder what it would be like to live in a world that honors women like you instead of fearing them. You dream of it sometimes. A place where mercy is not mistaken for magic, where love is not seen as manipulation, where care is not a threat but a gift. You may never live to see that world, but you live in this one. And in this world, kindness is currency and curse alike. You spend it carefully. You offer it quietly. You guard it like a flame in a storm. And you never stop giving it. Not because it is safe. Not because it is easy. But because it is who you are. And even if the world doesn't understand you, even if it never does, you will not harden. You will not break. You will remain soft, brave, dangerous, and kind. There are no shifts here, no scheduled rests, no midnight handovers. Your work is endless, wrapped in the same dusk-coloured cloth as your habit. Nights blend into days until you no longer know what season it is. Sleep becomes something you remember, like a favourite song. You can no longer hum something you ache for, but cannot reach. When the sun sets and the ward dims, your tasks do not pause. They simply change rhythm. The groans are softer, the coughs more ragged. The fevered ones begin to tremble. And you, half asleep on your feet, begin another round. Not because you are told to, but because no one else will. The candles flicker and cast gold on worn faces. The shadows grow longer. You walk from cot to cot with your basin and cloth, dabbing sweat, spooning water to dry lips, changing bandages that soaked through while you weren't looking. Your body pleads for rest. Your eyes blur. Your head tilts with heaviness, only to snap back when someone calls for you a moan, a whisper, a panicked clutching of your sleeve. You move because movement is all you have left. Because stillness invites sleep, and sleep is a luxury you cannot afford. There are too many still bodies in this room already. You will not become one of them. You learn to nap in snatches 5 minutes with your head against the stone wall, 10 on a stool in the corner, waking always at the sound of pain. You never fully fall. You hover, always alert to a shift in breathing, to the sudden silence that signals something is wrong. You've learned to live inside exhaustion, to carry it like your basket of linen, heavy but balanced. The ache in your joints, the throb in your temples, the tightness in your chest, they all become familiar. They are your companions now. You name them. You bargain with them. You beg them to hold off just a little longer until the sun returns, until someone else wakes up to take your place. But no one ever does. Sometimes you hallucinate. The flicker of a shape that isn't there. The sound of a name spoken softly behind you. You blink it away. You focus. You dip the cloth. You press the bandage. You murmur another prayer. You tie your apron tighter, as if it might hold your body together. The room sways. You drink cold water and splash some on your face. You've learned all the tricks. Chewing dry bread slowly to keep your mouth busy. Pressing your nails into your palms to stay grounded. Whispering psalms with each step, turning rhythm into fuel. You aren't even sure if you believe in the psalms anymore. But they carry you, and that is enough. You've grown afraid of sleeping. Not just because someone might need you, but because sleep brings dreams. And the dreams bring faces. The ones you couldn't save. The children who died in your arms. The burns you couldn't heal. The cries that never stopped. They visit you when your guard is down. In sleep, you cannot protect yourself. You feel everything again, too clearly. You wake with your chest tight, your throat raw, and tears you didn't know you'd cried. So you avoid sleep, not out of pride but out of fear. You'd rather stay tired than be haunted. When you do lie down, it is never in your own bed. It is on the floor beside a patient who trembles. On the bench near the fire, hoping the warmth will let you breathe. You rest with one ear open, your hand still clutching your cloth, your apron unremoved. You do not undress, not anymore. There's no point. You'll be needed again soon. Someone always wakes with a scream, a cough, a choking breath that pulls you from the edge of sleep. You rise without complaint. You've done it so many times your body forgets it's tired. But your soul remembers. You see the way others pity you. The sisters who shake their heads when you slump during prayer. The monks who offer small pieces of bread, believing food might fix what fatigue has built. You thank them. You smile. You accept the kindness. But you know what you need isn't bread. It's ours. It's quiet. It's the permission to stop without guilt. But guilt, like sleep, is never far away. You feel it when you close your eyes. You see it in the empty beds. You carry it into every dream you never finish. And yet, there is something holy in the stillness of night. When the ward goes quiet, when even the coughing subsides, when the candlelight dances gently on the walls, you feel something like peace. A fragile peace. A peace earned only by enduring. In those moments, you sit beside the dying and speak softly, not to wake the others, but to make sure the person passing is not alone. There is no applause, no thanks, no recognition, just your voice in the dark. A voice that says, I see you. I am here. You are not forgotten. You lose time. Days blur together. You forget the last time you bathed, the last time you laughed. You forget the sound of your own name, spoken kindly. But you remember every sigh of relief, every breath that steadied under your hand, every time a patient fell asleep because your presence made them feel safe. You hold those moments like prayer beads. They do not bring sleep, but they bring purpose. And when purpose becomes your pillow, you learn to rest differently. Not with the body, but with the heart. With the knowledge that you are doing something that matters. Eventually, morning comes. The light seeps in slowly, brushing your face like a cool cloth. The bells ring. The ward stirs. Another nurse enters with a clean basin. You nod. You do not speak. You stand. Your legs wobble. Your vision swims. You force yourself to smile, and you walk toward the next bed. Because sleep may be far, but care is here. And you are here. And that is enough for now. You always knew it would happen. That one day, it would be your body that failed. Not the bodies you serve, not the ones you bandage and bathe and cradle in the dark, but yours. You are not made of stone. You bleed, you break, and now, at last, you burn with fever. It begins subtly, a heaviness behind your eyes, a slight tremor in your hand, a chill that wraps itself around your spine, even beneath your layers of wool. You pretend at first. You keep moving. You whisper that it's fatigue. But your body knows better. And soon, you do too. Your breath becomes short. Your limbs weaken. You try to rise, and the world tilts sideways. You've helped so many through this moment. Now it's yours. No one knows what to do with you. You are not a patient, you've always been the one who tends, not the one who needs. When they lift you from the stone floor, their hands are awkward, hesitant. You're too familiar, too important, too human to be ignored, but too frightening in your weakness to comfort. They lay you in a corner cot, the same kind you've made for hundreds before. They whisper prayers as if your name doesn't belong among the dying. You want to say it's all right, that you've seen death before, that it comes gently more often than not. But your mouth is dry, your tongue thick. You close your eyes. You listen to the world you once moved through, now humming around you without your help. It is strange being cared for. The water someone else offers, the cloth on your forehead, the whispered, "You'll be all right. These are the things you've done thousands of times." Now they return to you. But they feel distant, unfamiliar, even undeserved. You want to rise, to help, to soothe the sister who sits by your bed with worry carved into her brow. But your body says no. It says wait. It says rest. You are used to hunger, to pain, to weariness, but not this. Not helplessness. not being the one others gather around. You hate the way your body betrays you. You hate that you are now the cause of someone else's sleepless night. In your fever, you see them, the ones you've lost. The children, the broken, the mothers who bled too long. They come in silence, not to haunt, but to remind. Their faces are soft, their eyes kind. They sit at the foot of your bed like old friends. They do not ask questions. They simply stay. You wonder if they've come to lead you somewhere. You wonder if this is the end. And part of you welcomes it not because you are tired of life, but because you are tired of giving all of yourself to it. You think of the peace that might come next. A world with no bandages, no screams, no endless nights. Just stillness. Just light. But you do not die. Your fever breaks one night in a sudden sharp wave. You wake drenched in sweat, gasping. The pain remains, but the edge of it softens. Your thoughts begin to untangle. The world steadies. You are still here. Alive, but changed. The sisters rejoice. They say it is a miracle. They say your service protected you. You say nothing. Because you know that surviving does not mean returning unchanged. It means you've passed through something most never see from both sides. And you carry that now. In your hands. In your breath. In the silence that follows healing. Your recovery is slow. You are not allowed to work. You sit. You drink broth. You rest your head on a pillow, not stuffed by your own hands. You listen to the ward in motion. Without you, the rustle of aprons, the soft footsteps, the scrape of basins. You should feel relief. Gratitude. Instead, you feel distance. Displacement. As if you've become a ghost in your own life. You are still here, but not part of it. Not yet. Your strength returns in inches, not strides. Your hands are steadier now, but your heart has grown quieter, as if it's still waiting for something you haven't named. And then, one morning, you rise. Your knees wobble. Your breath shakes. But you rise. You cross the room. You touch a patient's hand not as a nurse, but as someone who knows what it is to lie where they lie. They look at you, and something passes between you that no training could ever teach. You are one of them now, not just the healer, the healed, the survivor, the almost lost, the found. And in that space, in that fragile moment, you find your way back, not to who you were, but to who you are becoming. From that day, you move slower, not because you are weak, but because you now understand the weight of each step. You listen differently. You hold silence longer. You know the sound of your own name spoken through cracked lips. You know how much it matters to be held when you feel you might disappear. You return to your work with gentler hands, with a gaze that sees beyond fever and wounds. You see fear where others miss it. You see the hope that flickers in the smallest gestures. You become not just a nurse but a memory of survival. People begin to speak of you differently, not just as a servant of the sick, but as someone who came close to the veil and stepped back. You hear the stories they tell, how you never stopped praying, how your fever broke at the hour of angels. You smile. You let them believe what they need. But you know the truth. It wasn't angels who kept you alive. It was the hands that held yours, the cloth on your brow, the presence that did not leave when your breath rattled. You were saved not by miracles, but by care. And now you offer that care with deeper faith. Not in God, not in herbs, but in people, in touch, in staying, in the quiet love that exists between the sick and the ones who will not abandon them. You are not invincible. You never were. But you are enduring. And in a world like this, sometimes that is more sacred than any prayer. You rise again. You walk forward. And you keep your promise to be there always. Even when it is your body that breaks. Even when it is your heart. No one will write your name in the books. No paintings will be made in your honor. You will not be canonized, nor sung about in chapels. Your grave will be shallow, likely unmarked, perhaps shared. A simple wooden cross, if you're lucky. And even that will rot in time. Your bones will mingle with soil, nameless among the thousands who lived and died beside you. No legacy, no title. Only the memory of your hands, your prayers, your endless walking through the ward long after others slept. And yet you keep going. Not because you hope to be remembered, but because you remember them. The ones who passed through your care. The ones no one else recalls. You sometimes walk past the burial field just beyond the convent. It stretches like a quilt of earth and silence. You know where some of them lie, even if the markers are gone. You whisper their names. Not for them, but for yourself. A ritual. A remembrance. You speak them aloud when no one is near. They live in your breath now. In your marrow. In the way you gently close the eyes of the next one who slips away. You are a keeper of endings. A curator of final comforts. And you do it all without expectation. No coin. No praise. Only the knowledge that for a moment someone was not alone. There is something strangely beautiful in this forgetting. It frees you. You do not live for attention. You do not perform for accolades. You live in the quiet middle of things, in the spaces between life and death, joy and pain. Your work is a thread stitched into the great invisible cloth of mercy. You do not ask for recognition. You ask only for the strength to do it again tomorrow. And when the faces fade, because they always do, you carry them still. Not clearly. Not completely. But enough to know they mattered. That you mattered. Even if no one remembers you, you remember them. That is the deal. When young novices arrive at the convent, they look at you with quiet awe. Not because they know your story, but because they feel something in your presence. A weight, a history. You do not speak much. You do not lecture. But they watch you move. The way you place a blanket, the way you hold a wrist, the way you stand still when others rush. They sense that you have seen more than you say. And they begin to understand that care is not a Jobitzer language, one passed hand to hand, breath to breath. You teach them with silence, with presence, with eyes that say, it matters even if no one sees, even if it ends in grief. You wonder sometimes what will be left when you're gone. Not the grave. That will be dust. Not the name. That will be forgotten. But perhaps a gesture, the way someone holds a fevered hand, the way a nurse hums a lullaby at dusk, the way a young woman decides to stay even when the others have left. That, maybe, is legacy. Not loud, not lasting, but lived. And that's what you've done lived. Fully. Even in the quiet corners. Especially there. The priest once told you that God sees everything. You're not sure. You've seen too much suffering to believe in divine fairness. But if there is a record somewhere kept not in books, but in something greater then, maybe your name is there, written in the breath you caught for another, in the pulse you steadied, in the pain you bore quietly. Maybe the only heaven that matters is the one you create while you're here. The warmth you leave behind in another's memory. The comfort in a dying woman's hand. The breath that slowed when you walked into the room. There are days when grief grips you so tightly you cannot speak. Not fresh grief, but accumulated. Like water rising. The weight of years. Of losses. You move slower then. You take longer to light the candles. You forget to sing. But you do not stop. Even in your grief, you tend to others. And somehow, in the tending, your sorrow softens. It doesn't leave. But it becomes bearable. Because grief, too, is a kind of memory. A stubborn proof that you loved. That you stayed. The world outside moves on. New healers come with better tools. Science grows. Hospitals rise. But you remain. Not in body, perhaps not forever, but in practice. In instinct. In compassion. You are the unnamed foundation beneath their steps. The reason someone learns to say, "I'll stay with you," instead of walking away. They will never know your face, but they carry your work in their hands. In that way, you are not lost. You are simply woven in. And when your time finally comes, when your breath shortens, your hands fall still, your eyes turn inward, you hope for only one thing, that someone stays. That someone takes your hand. That someone hums. You do not need incense or scripture. You need presence, a voice, a warmth. The thing you gave so freely, You hope it comes back just once when you need it most. And if no one does, if you go quietly, alone, as so many did in your arms then still, you will go knowing this: you made the world kinder. One touch at a time. You softened death. You bore pain. You stayed. You remembered. And even in forgetting, the world was better for having held you. You will not be remembered in portraits. There will be no statues carved of your likeness, no halls bearing your name. The records will lose you. The histories will write about kings, crusaders, and saints, but not about you. You will remain unnamed in the margins, folded into the linen of time, and yet you will be there. In every moment of mercy, in every hand held during fever, in every gentle voice that says, "I'm here." You are not legacy in the grand sense. You are legacy in the quiet sense. In the enduring, in the everyday. You were never meant to be famous. You were meant to be felt. The modern nurse does not know your face. She studies anatomy from clean books. She wears gloves. She moves through hallways built of steel and light. But still, she feels something familiar when she kneels beside the dying. When she says a name aloud to bring someone back. When she leaves her own hunger aside to finish one more round. She does not know it, but she carries you. You live in her instincts. In the way she softens her voice for frightened patients. In the way she pauses before closing someone's eyes. In the way she stays, even when no one else does. You are the root beneath her practice. The shadow beside her lamp. And you live elsewhere, too. In the exhausted mother holding a feverish child. In the young man who chooses to care for his aging father. In the stranger who comforts someone crying on a train. In every person who chooses compassion over convenience, presence over avoidance. They don't call it nursing, but it is. And it is you. You echo through these acts. Not loudly, not recognizably, but undeniably. The invisible hand, the remembered comfort, the ancestral whisper that says, "Stay a little longer. You didn't teach this in books. You taught it with your breath. This is your immortality. Not marble, not scripture, but behavior passed down like instinct. The impulse to care, to sit beside pain without turning away, to touch with reverence. Your legacy lives in the space between two heartbeats zone giving, one receiving. It is not always noticed. Often, it is assumed. But it shapes the world more deeply than all the names carved in stone. Because kindness real, tireless, unrecognized kindness is the strongest architecture a world can build on. And you were one of its first architects. You once feared being forgotten. The long days, the empty stomachs, the dying who never knew your name at times, it felt like nothing would remain. But now, you see, the things that last are not always the loudest. The strongest forces are often the softest. Wind shapes stone. Water outlives fire. Presence changes lives. You were presence. You were the slow, steady miracle that kept people tethered to this world when everything else wanted to take them away. You were the candle that never asked to be noticed, only to burn long enough to light the next one. Your grave is simple, covered in moss. No dates, no titles, just a place where the earth has settled, and maybe, if one listens closely, a feeling of peace in the grass. The world around it has changed, but you remain. In the rhythm of footfalls in hospital corridors, in the hush of a prayer whispered at bedside, in the habit of washing hands before tending to the sick, in the silence after death when someone says, "You did everything you could." That is your eulogy. That is your reward. And if someone someday stumbles across your name on a scrap of parchment, a ledger of convent staff, they may pass it by. Or they may wonder, who was she? And they may never know. But that's all right, because someone else will light a candle for someone who's dying. Someone else will stay up all night holding a fevered hand. Someone else will pour their strength into another until there's nothing left. And they will think they are alone in doing so. But they are not. They are standing in your shadow. They are walking your path. They are carrying your torch. So rest now. You did enough. More than enough. You gave what no one else could. You stayed when others ran. You tended when others feared. You held the dying when the world turned its face. And you did it all with no promise of reward. No audience. No finish line. Just the stubborn, beautiful belief that no one should suffer alone. That was your truth. Your vow. Your legacy. And it remains. In every breath you helped prolong. In every life you comforted. In every soft-spoken goodbye. You were never just a nurse. You were the first quiet hero. And the world still echoes with your care.